to the stage.
Hello.
I see it. Oh, I couldn't read it if I wanted to.
Testing. Good. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about Omni-Channel and some of the challenges for retail companies out there of the traditional type, and what are the strategies to deal with kind of the new frontier that's been developing. So with me today, I have Laura Duke, Vice President of Innovations at Walmart, eCommerce. Also have Jim Morton, Executive Director, EY, and Jeff Davidson, who's Vice President, Commerce and Fulfillment Solutions from Ingram Micro. I'm Clint Crawford, currently Vice President of Operations for a company called MHX. We're a privately held commodities transporter based here in Southern California. We move coil steel, industrial commodities of that type off of the ports that come over rail or vessel or by truck. So you're probably saying, you know, what does a break bulk industrial guy know about omni-channel retail? Well, last night I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express, right? And before I went to bed, JDA, I read this book, Profitable Omni-Channel for Dummies. So I'm ready to go. No, but seriously, the last 13 years of my career have been in retail supply chain with big companies like Target and the Home Depot in the distribution ops and engineering side. So I have a kind of a firsthand view of what it takes to transform big companies like that, and really excited about being here. With that, I'll read the bios of our panel. Laura Duke is an entrepreneurial performance-driven, creative, and technologically savvy operations, supply chain, and logistics leader. She is an executive-level growth catalyst and change agent, accelerating profit through focused strategic leadership, innovation, and a macro-level approach to driving transformation, enhancing product portfolios and margins across diverse sectors and geographies. Jeff Davidson serves as Vice President, Commerce and Fulfillment Solutions at Ingram Micro. He is responsible for the strategy, growth, and oversight in all facets of the business. He and his organization enable technology, commerce, and supply chain solutions that are driven to help brands and retailers grow their global sales while offering exceptional customer experiences. Jeff previously served as General Manager of Global Supply Chain Operations at Microsoft, where he oversaw the supply chain network for all hardware, software products, fulfilling demand in all channels across 185 countries. And then to my far left is Jim Morton. Jim is an executive director with Ernst & Young. Jim is based in Jacksonville, Florida, and he leads EY's U.S. Logistics Consulting practice. He has 20 years of combined management, consulting, and industry experience in supply chain management. He has a focus particularly in consumer products, retail, and life sciences. He previously worked at UPS as both a consultant and an R&D engineer. He has significant experience in supply chain network optimization, third-party logistics, transportation, fleet management, global trade, warehousing, you name it. The list goes on. So thank you all for joining me today. So with that, I will let them tell a little bit about their history with Omni-Channel up to this point, and then we'll get started with the questions. Laura?
Absolutely. Laura Duke, and thank you for the introduction, Clint. And I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much for being here today, and thank you to USC for hosting. This is a fantastic event. And so a little bit about myself and Omni-Channel. I have been involved in some way in Omni-Channel before the word Omni-Channel existed. I am not a trendsetter. I didn't coin the phrase, which would have been pretty cool. I haven't published papers on Omni-Channel, which would be slightly less cool, but a lot more work. but I have been involved, let's say, in the day-to-day of omni-channel type of operations. So my career has been primarily on the operations and supply chain side of omni-channel. So I started in straight out of undergrad at Accenture Consulting doing supply chain consulting. I went from there to HP and also did supply chain at HP and did a stint at eBay, a long stint at a startup called Zazzle that does customizable marketplace. And then I've been at Walmart for about a year and a half. So all of my career up to the Walmart part has been kind of in the operations side of the house, logistics, supply chain. I've run everything from the sourcing and the inventory to fulfillment and manufacturing and the actually logistics piece. So that has been most of the history of my career. I came to Walmart actually because of the omni-channel opportunity and what I saw at Walmart. I was coming from a startup. I didn't think I'd go big company. I didn't think I'd go biggest company. And, but yet, I found an opportunity that was at this company that has this opportunity from an omni-channel perspective that really other companies don't have. So I came in on the e-commerce side, but of course, with all the projects we do from an innovations perspective for e-commerce, we have access to 4,700 stores in the US, a massive distribution and supply chain network that we kind of can tap into. And so that's the reason main reason I came to Walmart. The second reason is the opportunity that I have at Walmart, I'm actually on the customer experience side. So this is the first time I haven't been in operations. This is the first time I haven't been in the physical supply chain piece. And I am specifically focused on projects that are focused on pleasing the customer and making the best possible customer experience. So it's an interesting twist for me in my career. I'm absolutely loving it and having a great time with that.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, Jeff Davidson, thank you for all of your time, and again, thank you, USC, for such a great program. My experience with Omni-Channel, frankly, is I'd say the biggest experience is I have a family of shoppers. They shop way too much, and I think it's actually the best source of information when you're actually your own user and eating your own dog food. From a career perspective, when I was at Microsoft, I ran, obviously Microsoft's a manufacturer that sells in products into many, many channels, but also was a retailer, both online and brick and mortar. And so my organization that I led essentially developed and ran the supply chain, did the supply chain creation, and then the operations for each of those channels. And there was an added component, which was omni-channel plus the merging of physical and digital modes of delivery, and so that was an added dimension. In my current capacity at Ingram Micro, I lead a division that really provides brands and retailers solutions to help them navigate omni-channel and specifically grow through omni-channel. We've got a software platform that connects sources of supply, i.e. manufacturers or brands, with sources of demand, i.e. the channels. And then as well, we provide all the supply chain solutions around that if our customers choose. We work with well over 1,000 customers that are all really trying to navigate this space. And so it's definitely something that impacts everybody. And I'd say from an approach standpoint, my belief and our approach in terms of our strategy is to really link supply chain with omni-channel because really what we're trying to accomplish is help create a unified shopping experience for the consumers. And I don't believe that you can separate supply chain from omni-channel in order to do that. So again, the crux of it is unified commerce.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. And Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Clint. And also delighted to be here to speak on this topic. In terms of myself and my career background relative to omni-channel, as Clint had mentioned, started my career at UPS, and you can think of that as, essentially a fulfillment arm of of omni-channel. So, back in those days, it was e-commerce and, the whole dot-com evolution of things, but UPS played a pretty important role in that in terms of getting packages, the last mile delivery to certainly residential customers. As I moved more into consulting, fast forward to, I think this was around 2005, so still quite some time ago, I was involved in a project with a leading fashion retailer. This was a supply chain transformation program, and the mantra for that company and for that program was anything, anytime, anywhere, which kind of sounds like omni-channel retail. So, their objective was to make sure that the consumer, that she could obtain, essentially the same product in any of those channels. Things had not evolved at that point to have things like buy online, pick up in store, or having stores ship from their local inventory, but I think it was, in some sense, omni-channel. Move forward a few more years, I found myself working with a company that specializes in musical instruments, guitars and those types of things. And they had two customer bases, so they certainly had a retail segment, companies that you could go to locally to buy instruments, but they also had e-commerce. So it might be guitar picks, it might be guitar strings, might be some of those smaller items that they would fulfill by way of e-commerce. And this actually raised some very interesting questions and challenges that I think are relevant to omni-channel retail even today. So, for instance, in terms of distribution centers, should you use the same distribution center to fulfill both downstream retail stores as well as your e-commerce customers? And I think that's something that companies, based on their own specific situation, they're still thinking through that today. As well, in terms of inventory and inventory allocation across channels, for this particular customer, they could get a large order from a chain store that could virtually wipe out the inventory for a particular SKU. Then you could imagine you as a individual shopper visiting their e-commerce site, maybe trying to buy that one item, and it's out of stock. So, you may not even return back to that, the website. So essentially, they may have lost a customer. So I think that's still very relevant today in terms of how do companies, manage and allocate inventory across the different channels in an omni-channel supply chain. And then, move to today's world as a consultant. Most of the companies that I interact with, daily in terms of their needs, all of them are very focused on, at least in consumer products, retail, and even some other industries, they're focused on mapping out their strategy. How are they going to move forward with omni-channel retail? And the exam question seems to be how to take advantage of this tremendous growth in this area, how to delight customers, but at the same time, how to manage cost to serve, because typically the omni-channel solution is going to be more costly than simply fulfilling to retail stores. So I'll stop there and share some more anecdotes later.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jim. So in preparing for the panel, I like to do a lot of reading, and I ran across an article from the Harvard Business Review that I think encapsulates what's going on pretty well. And I'll just read an excerpt from it. It says, traditional retailers are feeling the heat. Even as competition intensifies, shoppers' visits to retail stores are declining every year, leading one industry veteran to ominously ask his peers, is anyone not seeing large traffic declines? Online retail, on the other hand, is thriving. Retail sales through digital channels, including mobile sales, increased by a massive 23% as late as 2015. Much of these gains have gone to online retailers. Amazon is the biggest beneficiary, now accounting for 26% of all online retail sales. What is more, as it continues to expand aggressively into new categories like grocery and fashion, Amazon's existential threat to traditional retailers is greater than ever. Just ask Alexa. So under these hostile conditions, traditional retailers have staked their futures on omni-channel retailing. The omni-channel strategy hinges on the idea that providing a seamless shopping experience in brick-and-mortar stores and through a variety of digital channels not only differentiates retailers from their peers, but also gives them a competitive edge over online-only retailers by leveraging those precious store assets. So, speaking of stores, first question will go to you, Laura. According to a recent study by Accenture, retailers are struggling to meet the organizational, technological, and operational challenges that come with providing customers that seamless shopping experience. Why do you think this has been so difficult? And what are you doing at Walmart to meet these evolving needs?
Yeah, that's a big question. So I think the Accenture study is a little bit dated, but I think that the problems and the challenges that retailers are having to create this seamless experience is very real and very current and still continuing today. So I think that's probably for a couple of reasons. So one of them is the bar keeps raising, right? So customers are out there, and we have increased adoption that across the board from a mobile and e-commerce. And I would have thought by the time my 90-year-old grandmother was having a smartphone and actually using it to shop that we had probably reached everybody. But that number continues to go up, right? And so there's increased adoption, but then there's also the increased expectation that the customer has in terms of what they want to get, how much assortment is out there, how they're going to get it, when and where they're going to either get it delivered or pick it up, and how fast, right? So this bar keeps raising. So that's one of the big challenges that we have. One of the other big challenges, of course, is in the retailers. On our retail side, the challenges that we have operationally, and that we are operating potentially in organizational silos. We have different prioritization that we have to fight against. We have supply chain limitations, so all of those operational challenges, and then also the challenges that we have from a technological perspective, right? So there's a real challenge in having retailers get those kind of back office systems to connect across all of their different channels. So I think that's where a lot of the challenge is. Now, I'll dive into a couple of very specific kind of Walmart examples where we've dealt with some of these challenges. One of the great things I think I have found about Walmart is this kind of never-ending, unrelenting focus on the customer. And we are always looking to please the customer. And what we've done is we work a lot to try to efficiencies in the business to be able to then take those efficiencies and pass that back to the customer in the way of price savings on what they order and what they buy every day. So when it comes to online, we have this ability then to utilize these stores, 4,700 stores in the US, to actually then provide some pretty interesting solutions for our digital customers. So the first example I'll give is really kind of in the more in the area of operational challenges, and this is two-day shipping. Okay, if I didn't bring up two-day shipping, I think we'd all walk out of here and say, hey, everybody is up against this battle, right? When you talk about customer expectation, the bar has been raised, and now two-day shipping is kind of the minimum, right? And I don't know how many people have dealt with this today. I'm sure a ton of the people in the room are already battling this. But if you don't have a crazy efficient supply chain, two-day shipping is cost prohibitive, right? It's very difficult to do. So from an operational challenge perspective, it's huge. Now, I've got to say, Walmart has an advantage of a pretty vast supply chain network. And so we have facilities in places where proximity, because the first thing is place your distribution centers in places that make sense and where you're 2 days or less away from the customer. So that's kind of the no-brainer. Everybody gets that. Retailers are up against challenges. So Walmart might not have been because we have FCs in the right places. But other retailers aren't necessarily large enough to have multiple FCs that all get into a 2-day network, right? So we had an advantage from that starting point. But with that advantage, and mostly I find whenever you have an advantage, there's usually just as big a challenge that comes along with the advantage, is what we were up against was really getting the right thing in the right place at the right time in the right quantity, and making that happen across a massive network with a lot of different products and a very high volume against it. So that was a huge challenge for us. It comes with a lot of cross-organizational, we had to break down those silos. We had a lot of cross-organizational project work that happened, massive analytics, as you can imagine, to figure out what the historical volume and expected future volume would be. So there was a lot of different organizational challenge and operational challenges around that. We launched free 2-day shipping with no fee, no membership fee in January, which is pretty game-changing in the environment of actually having that free 2-day shipping on millions of products across this. Now, it wasn't a perfect launch. We're still refining it as we go today. And I think that's one of the other lessons learned on this, is that you have to put a ton of work into doing it. We did it on a very fast time scale, and we just kept going and plowing ahead. So still working on that today. So that's on the operational side. If we want to talk about the kind of technical challenges that a lot of retailers are up against, one that we dealt with this year as well is we launched a project called Easy Reorder. And so to explain that one, I'll give an example. The example I usually use based on our Walmart customer base is diapers. Maybe not as applicable to this demographic, but how many students do we have? Everybody's kind of like, okay, how many people were a student at one time somewhere? All right, okay, dead on. Okay, so I will try to pull deep and channel my undergrad days at the best school in the world.
This one?
USC.
How about that?
Yeah, go Trojans. So, and think about what was in my apartment cupboard back then, and I will pull out some other examples other than diapers. So let's see. So let's say you stop at your local Walmart store, and you pick up some necessities, specifically cereal. I ate a lot of cereal. And you go home. You get home, and then you realize you forgot a whole bunch of things, right? Because I always do that. So you log on to Walmart.com, and on Walmart.com, you go and you add ramen and sunscreen and cardinal and gold face paint for your next football game, right? You add all this to your cart on Walmart.com. And then you, next time you log onto the app, you're gonna see that you have everything in there nicely organized. Here's all the items you bought. Not only the things on .com, but also the cereal in the exact brand and size that you bought in the store, okay? So we went and we took all your product, omni-channel perspective, everything that you buy, whether it's brick and mortar, whether you bought it at .com, we put it into one fantastic, well-organized order history so that you can go and reorder that, right? Now, the technological challenges to that were huge. We have different systems, as you can imagine, between stores and .com. They started up separately. And so there's different systems to sync up. We have some shared product SKUs. We have some that are completely separate. So all of this, we somehow had to get together into a combined order history so that people could see it. But to explain why we did it and why it makes sense, so how many of you have actually gone out and set up, let's say, a new account for consumables on any shopping site? Some people must say, and how was your experience? Was it easy? It's never easy. No matter what your UI is, if you have 100 products that you buy on a regular basis, that is incredibly difficult to go out there and pick the SKUs. It just takes a lot of time, right? This way you can go into a store, walk through the store, just grab the items that you want, put them in your cart, and by the time you get home, it's all there nicely organized for you, and you have your shopping list so that you can go forward and go and pick that up whenever you want, right? So it's incredibly, incredibly impactful to people, and has been a huge success. I'm not the only one that loves it, but also a huge challenge from a technology perspective in what we've been building kind of across the organization. So I think to wrap that up, or at least my piece of that, I think the challenges are very big. And just because Walmart has a big network and supply chain doesn't make those challenges any easier. I think the idea is to go and to run and to work on it as hard as you can and make those things happen, and keep going and iterating and really focus on what that customer wants. Because when the customer gets an easier experience, then they are going to be shopping on your site rather than somebody else's. So.
Fantastic. Jim, Jeff, anything you would add?
Yeah, I think, focusing on why do I think some of the retailers out there are struggling with making the transition in omni-channel, right? I think first and foremost that at its core, I've seen it being treated as a project in many cases, but in reality, it's a business model and it's a transformation for most of the retailers. And it's got to be really treated as a complete transformation. If you think about the complexity that goes into scaling the systems, aligning horizontally organizations that were once set up in different silos, either by product category or function, and then treated different channels differently. And so how do you break that glass, so to speak? It boils down to transformation. I think the first, so what goes into that transformation? I think first and foremost, where companies like Walmart, where you can see make a very fast transition with omni-channel, first and foremost, it starts by the mindset. Adopt an outside-in mindset as opposed to an internally focused mindset. So customer-centric. And that has to run through the entire organization from a cultural perspective. Second, organizationally, I think companies that have been set up in silos now have to think about, from a customer's perspective, how does all of this stuff unify? And so the silos have to get broken, and that's very hard. There's a lot of legacy inside most of these companies that needs to be broken, and that takes a great deal of leadership. But the purpose of breaking those silos is really to stay customer-centric, but also drive more agility through the organization and speed as these changes start to occur. I think as part of breaking those silos as well, getting into supply chain, it's really, we've got to move supply chain from back office to front office. Because to get that unified experience, as I said earlier, it requires a complete leakage. And so, you look at it in terms of almost like user stories or user experience type of stories is a great way to organize and actually drive change. If those silos don't get broken, what the consumers end up getting sold is your org chart, right? And the last thing you want a consumer getting is an org chart as opposed to a product or experience that they really desire. And so I think that's imperative. But I think that the challenge in terms of omni-channel, I think it's larger than what a lot of us really think. And in terms of the overall scale, the complexity associated with it, and why it demands change organizational systems and then investments in infrastructure to scale. I think it's Gartner has 100 billion. What does that mean? 100 billion. It's not the money in my bank account, but kind of wish it was. But 100 billion digital transactions by 2020. That's about 3x where we are today. If you think about 100 billion, let's just assume that, say, 30% of those are physical transactions. Let's just say that by the way, there's returns. Those are physical too. Let's say there's 15% of that. You could put a lot of numbers together, but you boil it down and you get to a lot of transactions globally. And And when I pare this down, I look at it and say, wow, when you start to peel this down, you go from 100 billion digital transactions and make an assumption that physical transactions, even 30% of those could occur over a 4-week period out of the year, right? Everybody knows this Q4 peak season, Christmas holiday rush. Extrapolate that out to about 400 million transactions a day during that period. To give you an idea, our company ships roughly half a billion, so 500 million a year, okay? And so just looking forward, you get this giant transactional load against a global infrastructure that frankly isn't ready for a load like that. And so I think the innovation that goes into it's quite different. So that's kind of at a macro level, is just rethinking systems, infrastructure, talent, and the overall solutions. But even things like that require a transformation are, say, forecasting, whereas traditional forecasting has been, I'm looking to figure out what's going to sell, pretty much where it's going to sell, how much of it's going to sell. And now you have to actually add another dimension into it. How's it either going to be consumed or delivered has got to then become part of that forecasting equation, right, to enable the right omni-channel experience. So for example, is this going to be purchased in store and walked out? Is it going to be purchased in store and delivered? Is it going to be sent to a locker and then a consumer collects it? Is it going to be shipped to a store for a customer to come in and collect it? And so on and so on. Is it going to an office or a residence? And so those types of things, you're now trying to figure out how do I predict not just the product, but the end experience that's going to be consumed and mash those things together. But it's an example of sort of a functional transformation that's needed.
And yeah, I'll build on that. I like the easy reorder example, and I think that highlights a couple of things that I see, around this topic. And one is innovation. How can you take something that's maybe difficult and make it easier, more seamless? So I know personally, I'm a consumer as well. To create those shopping lists on an online website to create my my order, that can be very time-consuming and complicated. So I really do like the idea of a use case. If Walmart or whoever can help you to build that list through actually shopping the physical store, what a great idea. So I think that just underscores how important innovation is in this rapidly evolving space. I think the other piece that ties to that I heard Laura mention is just the magnitude of how complexity of systems integration to make that happen. So you may have something that's a rather straightforward use case, but then when you map it to all the systems interactions that need to happen between potentially disparate retail systems and .com systems, that's quite a tangled web that you're dealing with. So I think, we see that quite a bit in the omni-channel space with our clients in terms of how they're mapping out strategy, how are they going to make the process as seamless and easy for the consumer.
Fantastic. Well, the transformational and change management challenges are significant. I want to come back to that one later, but how you affect the people really makes the difference, whether it really comes together. So we've got an empty chair, and we'll maybe talk about the empty chair, the elephant in the room, which is Amazon. So Amazon clearly has accelerated consumer behavior. Anytime, anywhere, always on, always available, right? Omnipresent. What seems to be working for brick and mortar retailers as an effective differentiating response? Are they really leveraging that precious brick and mortar retail's historical data? Maybe do some predictive analytics? Jeff, what are you seeing that's been working or maybe should be exploited further?
You want to take that one first?
Yeah, I'll take that one first. Yeah, so maybe just to set the stage a little bit, reinforce some of your comments, Clint. Amazon is obviously a driving force in this space, and many of the things they're doing are essentially resetting expectations. So I'll use by example the Prime Now network, which I think that's maybe 2 or so years old at this stage. But essentially, Amazon is deploying 4 distribution centers in many metropolitan areas that, not just two-day service, but actually getting down to same-day service. If you need something for a select number of SKUs, it's not everything in their catalog, but for a select number of SKUs, 2-hour delivery and even 1-hour delivery. So, they're positioning the inventory quite close to the customer. They're using relationships with couriers. They're even using an innovation that's, Uber-esque, Amazon Flex, to have, drivers with private automobiles do the last mile delivery, something I call the extended enterprise, and leveraging that. So that certainly is ratcheting up consumer expectations for just instantaneous buying experience. I think also the nature of the shopper is changing, and it's somewhat of a generational thing. So, the older generation, I'll probably include myself in this, just dating myself, but, grew up with traditional brick and mortar retail. It's very comfortable. But, as you get into younger generations, and some of our research, the prototypical omni-channel shipper, a little bit surprising, it's actually a 46-year-old woman who, she's employed, she is, busy, so productivity is very important to her. Having convenience is important. She's highly connected, owns 2 devices that she'll use for shopping, and shopping is an experience that she can enjoy. She shares it through social networks and engages in that way as well. But when you get into millennials and Generation X, it only intensifies in terms of these are people that they essentially grew up with a phone in their hands, a smartphone. So there's a generational expectation. So I think you've got these different forces at play. So in terms of, how can retailers, effectively, deal with that in this landscape of omni-channel? So, I think the key thing is they need to leverage the assets that they have and just use them in the most sensible manner. Clients that I talk to, they're not necessarily looking to, deploy the type of infrastructure that Amazon has to achieve 1 or 2 hour, service. It's just not something that's feasible for them, and probably it's not necessary either. But they are looking to, be competitive, delight their customers, and use the assets that they have, in the most sensible manner that they can. And I think we've highlighted, some of this today. It's the fact that, there's a brick and mortar presence so that people can still go in, touch, and feel a product, right? They can still have an interaction with hopefully a helpful, store associate that can provide a high level of service, and that creates kind of a sticky relationship. And then there's the inventory deployment. You've got inventory that is deployed usually very close to where people live, and that can be used to support omni-channel as well. So some of the things that we're seeing, of course, many of these are going to be familiar to you. They're in a sense not rocket science anymore, but the buy online, pick up in store. So that's become much more common. I'll use the Walmart example. And as a consumer, I tend to be a little skeptical about some of these things. So if I'm buying groceries, maybe for canned goods, I trust somebody to pick out a can of soup. But when it comes to produce, I want something that looks pretty fresh, like I've picked it out myself. And I know I've had a very favorable experience trying Walmart.com and having an associate greet me in the parking lot. The product was in pristine condition, looked just as if I would have picked it up myself, and it was a great experience. So I think executed well, the buy online, pick up in store, is a great strategy. The next piece might be that we could talk about is the buy online, but then the retailer's actually going to ship it from store inventory, because that represents a big pool of distributed inventory. There may be reasons that they don't necessarily want to fulfill from a regional distribution center. Maybe the item's not in stock. Maybe it is getting it to the consumer that much quicker. But we're seeing a lot of success in this area as well. So, as an example, I believe latest figures I've seen, Target as a company, out of about 1,000 of its stores is actually doing ship from store, where associates are packaging merchandise and shipping it. Going back to Walmart again, same sort of thing, and I believe there's an innovation. Maybe Laura could make more comments on this, but part of the big question for retailers is how to manage that cost of delivery. So, it's been in the news that Walmart is actually looking at using their own store associates to help with the delivery process. So you can imagine you're a store associate, you've got to commute home after work. You may be passing close by the neighborhoods of where your customers are who have placed online orders. Why not use that as a means to reduce the cost of last mile delivery? So I think that's still being played out, but I think it's quite an innovative idea. Next, the showroom concept. So I think Bonobos is probably a really good example of this. So, if you're in the market for, a shirt or pants, you can go into Bonobos. You can actually try on representative items. They may not be the exact, color that ultimately you want to buy, but, you get a feel for the fit, the style, and then they can go ahead and, order it for units fulfilled online. So in this sense, you're using kind of the best of what retail has to offer. You've got that physical presence. You can touch and feel. You can have an interaction with a person who can articulate, what's good about this product, or maybe you'd rather look at this. So that's still valued, but instead of having all of that inventory actually deployed into the store, it's being deployed from a consolidated distribution center, so that you're not having to have as much inventory across the network. And in something like fashion retail, that's enormously important, because there's so many markdowns and merchandise that just gets sold through other channels at the end of the season. You could also think about how that could be extended to maybe other businesses. So I'm thinking of a very well-known retailer that actually started out as a catalog company many, many, many years ago, before I think any of us were born. And enormously successful, used to be the top retailer, but today struggling more, and largely because there's a large retail footprint, kind of a glut of retail inventory, if you will. Well, maybe one potential solution to that is, at least for some certain products, move to more of a showroom format, where the inventory doesn't need to be in every store, have more compact stores, less square footage, less real estate, and let the customer experience the products in the store, but then fulfill from a distribution center. So potentially an idea. So again, needing to be creative. Maybe another creative example, just illustrating how retailers can use different means to compete with the likes of Amazon and pureplay.com retailers. Again, going back to fashion apparel. So you can imagine there may be companies that operate in this space that are more into, let's say, discount apparel, stuff that they're selling in the store. It's kind of the treasure hunt concept. People go in there weekly to kind of go through the racks and pick out things that may be current styles at a discounted price. Pretty exciting. So the scenario here is, this company could also have a set of products that represent more like basics, stuff they consistently keep in stock, that would be on their e-commerce fulfillment site. Shopper orders some of those products from the e-commerce site, specifies deliver to store. I'll pick it up there. It's very economical for the retailer to do that. It can just piggyback on their store replenishment shipment. But before the order gets there, an associate in the store is going to perform the role of a personalized shopper. They're going to have advanced notice of what that order is. They can start looking through the rack, saying, oh, this is size 8, it's this type of color. Oh, this would really go well with this or that, and I could accessorize it. When the shopper comes into the store to pick up her order, she sees that there's several other things that weren't available online. They were specifically available in the store, and maybe some of those will work out really well, and she'll buy additional products. So again, just another way of being creative. Also, cite an example. I'm not sure if many of you have been exposed to a company called Argos that's in the UK, but I think they're a terrific example of a company that seems to be doing this pretty well. So I was recently in London for vacation with my family and forgot to bring power adapter, or maybe my wife, I think she bought the wrong power adapter, whatever it was, we needed a power adapter. So I could just slip into an Argos store, just a block from my hotel, order the power adapter through their computer interface. 5 minutes later, somebody brings it from the back room. I'm on my way. So just great experience. But if I was somebody that actually lives in London and I need to have something that's not in the store, or I need something like an oven or a piece of furniture, Argos has a very sophisticated hub and spoke network that I'm likely to be able to get that merchandise the next day, or maybe for something that needs to be installed, I can select a delivery window 2 or 3 days out and have it installed. So they seem to some extent have cracked the code on how to do that. Last example I'll use is around predictive analytics. And Clint, I think this was part of your question originally. So I'll start with using Amazon as the backdrop to this. So I think everybody is aware of Amazon's foray into the grocery market with the acquisition of Whole Foods. And part of that very obviously is to get that footprint of locations that have storage for perishable merchandise, and essentially they've got a new supply chain that they can use for omni-channel fulfillment for that class of product. But if you think about it, they're also gaining essentially a treasure trove of customer purchasing data. And especially in grocery, there's an extremely consistent, repetitive behavior of purchases. And by acquiring that data, Amazon gets a much better idea of, well, if somebody buys this SKU, they're likely to buy this SKU, or relationships between product groups, whatever it is. But it's information that's fueling predictive analytics that's going to help Amazon be a more effective omni-channel merchant. In the same manner, I think this is a lesson for retailers that, look, they've got the store traffic already today, that you need to be using that intelligence, the data, the shopping behavior, the consumer trends in order to be able to also fuel your own e-commerce presence and really kind of tie those two channels together in an omni-channel fashion.
Fantastic, Jim. Any others want to add to that?
I think
you covered.
that was pretty thorough.
Okay.
I like it.
So Jeff, I have one for you. We've talked a lot about retailers, obviously, but you did a lot in the B2B space. So what are the implications of omni-channel on brands and manufacturers? What do you see there?
I'd say that brands and manufacturers are feeling a bit of a squeeze. I think, feeling like there's a lot of catch-up to do. And let me kind of give it to you from this perspective. I think there's really 3 main drivers. One is things are getting more endless, and I'll talk about that in a minute. 2, we're getting more digital and also global. And then I'd say 3, there's more models. Marketplace models, third-party seller models, as opposed to first-party sales and things like that. So all these things are hitting the brands very, very quickly. And so let me start with endless. What I meant was really endless aisle. So the squeeze for the brand is really, on the retail side, they obviously want an endless aisle, but they don't have an endless balance sheet, nor do they want one. And so more of the inventory ownership and the responsibility to deliver the experience and the mechanics of the supply chain are actually being pushed further back to the brands. And a lot of these brands, frankly, aren't equipped to deal with online scenarios or even omni-channel scenarios quite as much. And so it takes a big transformation for them. I think the second piece on being more digital, I was talking with one of the largest television manufacturers, and I was actually really surprised to learn. We were kind of talking about the implications of more marketplace sales, more going online, and these are giant televisions. And what they said was that actually what we're finding is their smallest televisions are being ranged in stores and sold. People come in, they touch them, they like them, they take them. Their largest televisions are actually shifting online. So categories that you wouldn't normally expect. I wasn't expecting that, a 60-inch television is being purchased in greater proportion online than actually in the store. And so, why is that? Well, cars are getting smaller. Retailers don't want that added risk on high COGS items on the balance sheet, and all those types of things. And so the brands are definitely having to cope with going digital and omni-channel to a greater extent. In addition, some other examples. You have, I think by 2020, Gartner predicts that consumable products, the essential products that are in your house that you use every single day, 50% of those consumable products would essentially be available to be auto-replenished in some way, shape, or form. How? IoT and connected home, right? And so when you're getting that level of data being consumed, the question is how equipped are these brands to be able to use that information, capitalize it, and convert it, whether it's changing their business models or changing the supply chain. You also see the same thing with more marketplace models. In fact, as that aisle gets more and more endless, brands that used to sell through retail channels and distribution channels and things like that, and they've really built their companies around models like this, they're finding that they're having to become e-tailers, essentially selling on marketplaces themselves. And the implications of that are, what marketplaces do I sell on? Where am I going to get the velocity? How do I work out all the logistical back end on the supply chain? How do I get the right demand sensing and pricing and all those types of things? Because online e-commerce sites and marketplace scenarios, while to us as a consumer may look the same, the mechanics for a manufacturer are actually very, very different. And so I think all of those things, it goes back to the theme that I mentioned earlier, they require not projects, they require transformation and really strong partnerships.
Absolutely. Anyone add on that? All right, so you got into transformation, and I've been itching to talk about that as it relates to people. So Laura, Walmart, kind of the most vivid example of that. How has the kind of the omni-channel order fulfillment cycle time requirement? We talked about the 2 days or you're out of the game kind of situation. How has that changed the roles and responsibilities of those operational associates that we see at fulfillment centers, that we see at the stores, and in terms of how they collaborate now? Because we have an endless aisle. What has changed? What's been the challenges? What are the success stories?
Right, yeah, so it has a big impact on associates. All of our omni-channel work definitely has a large impact on associates. I would say, and it's not just the time frame that is now expected, but we're trying to make sure that we provide the best and fastest service. So it's the speed, it's the quality, it's all of those pieces and all of the different things that we're working on. So I'd say it's impacting across the industry. I think it's impacting operational resources in the facilities and people in the facilities like FCs, where now rather than packaging for one-off shipping, they may be packaging to ship to store. They may be, and now they have to have areas for both and expertise in both and systems in both. And it's retraining and refocusing. It's impacting especially resources in stores. And I'll give a couple of Walmart examples of some of the stuff we're doing and how much it's really impacting those associates, because we're really completely rethinking the way we do business. And so associates are having to adjust over and over again. And then there's the collaboration piece, which you kind of alluded to as well, which is so big because of the fact that you've got ship to store, and you've got, we've got an e-commerce arm in the Bay Area, and then we have stores where most people are in Arkansas, and we have Jet now, and Jet is in New Jersey, and we have FCs all over the country, and all of these people working together to make these things happen. The amount of collaboration that needs to happen from an omni-channel perspective is massive. So I'll go with a couple of examples, and Jim kind of touched on a couple of them when he was talking as well, but I think I think pickup is a very interesting solution. A lot of people are working on it now. A lot of different retailers are trying to figure out how to take something that's ordered online and have it picked up in their brick and mortar facilities. It's a tough thing to solve, and it has massive associate impact. So pickup realigns the entire store. Now, Walmart has had pickup for a while. We set pickup as a separate area. So this isn't our regular customer service area. There's a specific area where our things go shipped to store, and then a customer can go in and pick up those items, right? And so the supply chain was there. One thing that we did early this year that I think was kind of more differentiating is we added a pickup discount. And I don't know if anybody saw this, but in April we launched a pickup discount. And it's not just any little pickup discount. What we did and how we did it is you take away the direct-to-home shipment, and you're saving a significant amount of your cost, right? And it depends on what product you're shipping and what that looks like. But if we can use our own transportation network of 6,700 trucks and use that to get it to our different facilities, we're saving money. And if we take that and we encourage the customer, we say, hey, we're saving money, so we're passing the money on to you, customer does it more. So pickup discounts, we have, if you take a car seat, a baby car seat, again, one of my typical examples, $148, the pickup discount is $7.40. If you take something like a Vizio HD TV that's $1,698, I think, and then you take that, it has a $50 pickup discount. Like there's some significant savings that Walmart incurs in this process, and so we pass it off to the customer. So it's a solution that makes sense. It's also a solution that even though we already had pickup, now we're driving massive volume to the stores for this. It makes a big difference in the associates, how many associates we have, how we train them. These associates are exclusively trained within the pickup area to support the customers that are coming for pickup. It's different systems, it's different, it's a whole different process, not to mention the impact on associates in the FC facilities that are now have a lot more focus on their ship to store in volumes that they've never seen in the past. And so that changes the formatting, the technology, the engineering as far as the actual physical shipping equipment and what we're using and how. It changes our carrier pickup times. It changes a lot of different things. So we've impacted things kind of across the network from an associate perspective for pickup recently. The other example that I've used that has existed for a while, but I personally love, this is life-changing for me, is grocery. So, and I know Jim talked a little bit about it, but the idea of personal shoppers. And I will tell you, it has been 2 years since I have gone into a grocery store with my 2 kids. Now, my kids are 8 and 10 now, so a couple of years ago, right? The last time I went into a grocery store, I was with them, right? I was in the produce aisle. I turn around, my 2 kids are wrestling on the ground in the produce aisle, which of course is, I know you guys have seen that before, no doubt, yeah, that I'm that parent. Lesson learned, don't go and get yogurt with extra toppings before you go to the grocery store with your kids. But I'm telling you, the experience was horrible. It was horrible for me because it was just annoying. It was horrible for the woman that was just trying to get her bananas, who had the whole thing melt down in front of her. It was definitely horrible for my kids, who, by the way, it was a fun wrestling match. But so they were having fun with that, but they were doing it because they were bored out of their minds. Grocery shopping for consumables is, I don't know many people that like that like going when they have to go and fill up their entire cart and get everything that they need. So this kind of service is really life-changing, and we're seeing it from kind of the adoption rates that we have from groceries. So the grocery service that we've added is a personal shopper will go and pull your items for you. You can get it same day, within a couple hours, and you can get it brought to your car. So all you do is you pull up outside, you leave those kids like bolted in as much as you can, and then they will bring it to your car. And so the experience really is pretty amazing. Now, from an associate perspective, and from a store perspective, so from a store operations perspective, this is a big deal, right? Because now we have a whole different section. For grocery, you actually have to have a refrigerated section up in front just for the items that that personal shopper went and picked to wait for me to come 2 hours later to pick it up. So there's a whole different process. They have a picking process. These are personal shoppers that are now required to decide whether, Jim's bananas are, good enough for Jim to be happy with. And then also to be able to greet the customer at the car. And Walmart's always had greeters and interaction with the customer. This is a whole different level when you're greeting at the car and loading groceries for the customer. So big impact on associates and kind of what they're doing and how they're changing the way they work. So there's a lot of things going on there from an associate level. And I think I want to add a few things just in general in what I've seen from associate level as well as the challenges that I talked to before is that I really think that there's a few things when it comes to omni-channel and the things that we're looking at and the challenges that we're up against, that there's a few main focuses that I think we've really got to pull out of this. One of them would be my first one and my foremost one, and maybe I'm a little biased, but it's the customer focus, right? Always focus on the customer. And Mark Laurie, our new CEO, likes to say that Walmart has a maniacal focus. So be maniacal, like really focus on the customer. And when I say that, I don't mean just at the strategy level. Yeah, your strategy needs to focus on the customer, but you also need to drag it down to your relationships with every partner and person that you work with. So we talked a little bit about the impact on the manufacturers. We talked about impact on the associates. Associates, suppliers, manufacturers, third-party marketplace sellers, they all need to be on board with this high-level strategy of focusing on the customer. And I'm telling you, it's a little bit hard to do when you're doing things that are kind of out there, but they need to be, you bring them along with you because, so Walmart, big organization, but our Q1 GMV was up 69%, which is pretty monumental, and it's based on these kinds of initiatives. So they'll want to come along. We've just got to make that kind of thing happen. So that's the first, is focus on the customer. The second thing that I would say we need to really do is be bold. So we need to go out there and do things like things that we haven't tried before, like the associate delivery. We've got that piloted in 3 stores, and we're learning, and we're trying something out, right? But be bold and go out there and try to do big things. Be flexible, be willing to try something, be willing to fail, and go out and do that. And then the third thing that I'd say we really need to do, focus on customer, be bold, and then the last thing is just keep moving. So one of the big problems with being bold is you've got these big, huge strategies and you think, oh, I need to do X, Y, and Z, and this is my whole big picture. Keep things moving, like launch. Don't just be bold, but launch something even if it's not perfect, and keep it moving and do small things and make your way up to the big, bold strategy. Because I'm telling you, if you've got an idea for a big, bold strategy, that somebody else is also working on that. And so if you're waiting until the ultimate to launch something in terms of omni-channel, there's a chance that 5 people will get there, before you. So doing kind of